Hello and welcome to the Boiler Upload Show. I am excited today because we have one of my favorite people that cover Purdue, Kelly Hallinan from the WLFI Sports Anchor. Well, I guess from WLFI Sports Anchor. Kelly, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Um, First off, thanks for joining. And then we are here to talk about storylines for the season, which has been a definitely surprising. If we would have had this conversation 2 weeks ago, a little bit of a happier conversation. I guess we'll touch on real quick just the IU Purdue game. What were your impressions of just the game and then the atmosphere itself?
I knew it was going to be a crazy atmosphere. I was so excited. I went to the game at Assembly Hall and I thought if they could be that close at Assembly Hall, they got this game. I knew it would be back and forth. I knew it would be a nail biter. I thought Purdue would jump out to an early lead. IU would come back and then it would just be back and forth until the very end. But I thought Purdue would come out with the win, especially the fact that they held Trace Jackson Davis to 0 points in the first half. I was like, they did it. They shut him down. But we all knew Jalen Hood, what he's capable of. He scored, I think, 16 points when we played at Indiana. And so I knew he was good. I didn't think he had that performance in him, especially at Mackey. But I mean, it's like what Matt Painter said after the game. If you look at a stat sheet and you see Trace Jackson Davis's stats, you think Purdue would win.
Right.
But it was just crazy. And then Miller Kopp starts hitting threes. Trey Galloway goes off in the second half. It was just kind of like the perfect game for IU because if they don't have Trace Jackson Davis. So I think that game really showed me that Purdue is going to struggle if they can't hit from the field.
Yeah,
And that was
absolutely.
kind of my biggest takeaway from that game was somebody's got to start hitting threes because obviously we can rely on Zach Edey, but if they're able to double him, if they're able to shut him down, we really don't have any other offense.
Yeah, Painter said it after the game. We out rebound them by 20. They weren't that bad on turnovers, and then they get to the line 33 times, and they still lose at home to pretty much to Hood Schifino, who had maybe the best performance in Mackey since probably Evan Turner way back in the day. Definitely doesn't seem like a true freshman.
Definitely. I think he's one and done. I think he's league bound.
So that's good news for Purdue.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are still obviously the toughest part about it. It almost works against yourself when you have such a high to start the season. 13-0. I think it was 22-1. Purdue was as they were ranked number 1 7 weeks this season. I think something like that. To now, losers of 4 of the last 6, but still a lot of wins. Still top 5 in the AP poll. Still on target, kind of, for a number 1 seed. So what we're going to do today is you have 3, I have 3 of our favorite storylines of the season. Try to get some of that good feeling back going into the last 2 games of the regular season. Do you want to start or do you want to hit cleanup at the end?
I can start.
Okay.
My first kind of storyline that it makes covering this team so much fun is the willingness of the players accepting their roles.
Okay.
And not, everybody wants to be the scorer. Everybody wants to, put up crazy numbers like Zach Edey. But the way that this team just plays their roles that Matt Painter kind of assigns them is crazy to me because I feel like Purdue is able to do something that so many players in college basketball don't do anymore. They redshirt, they stay for multiple years, and they just accept their role. And I think 2 names that really stick out to me, or I guess 3, is first Ethan Morin, right. Mr. Basketball Pennsylvania. I'm sure he had a lot of offers and he came to Purdue and didn't play too much his first few years. He got out there, but I think, when Jaden Ivey was out, Brandon Newman kind of took that role, right. And it wasn't Morin. Now Morin's in the starting 5 and he's their defensive specialist, which is crazy that right. He just kind of has accepted that he's the go-to guy. He's going to run around the other team's best player. And I think another one, Mason Gillis started the season, got injured, then came back, got back in the starting lineup for a little bit, but now it's Caleb again, it looks like. But when he's able to come off the bench and break that 3-point record, right. It's just like the way that they just accept their role is crazy to me because I feel like everybody just wants to be the best player and, make a name for themselves. And the way that it helps it helps the entire team as a whole, because and if everybody's doing their part, they work together really, really well. And I think that's why they've had so much success.
Yeah, it really is antithesis of everything you think of basketball. Because it really is just a bunch of role players accepting what they need to do. Painter talks about it a lot. He never promises anything. He just, this is what I see you could do if you do this. Morton's spoken to this quite a bit this season. Defense was the way he saw himself getting on the court, and not the first person to have that happen under Painter. Raphael Davis, same thing, came from a high school where he's, these guys all score 20, 30 a game in high school. They have to kind of transform who they are mentally, physically, all that to sacrifice and get there. And I definitely think last year, it was Edie and Trey that were splitting minutes. And this year, I don't think it's been, obviously, it's not quite to the same, point total and rebounds because Edie's there. But what Caleb and Mason is doing is giving us pretty much a perfect 40 minutes of power forward. And so, yeah, I think you're spot on with both of those. You can go further too. Newman is still, coming off the bench. David Jenkins Jr. is closing in on 2,000 points in his career, and he's averaging like 2 points a game now. It's wild from top to bottom.
Trey Kaufman ran too when Edie was out. He had that 24-point performance. Yep. Like, it's just crazy. Like, I remember on Twitter, it was a thing like, all right, whose night's it going to be tonight? Like, right. Who's going to be the go-to guy? Because they're just so deep and they have so many pieces, and it's just cool how they kind of all have accepted their role. And I think that's been a huge part of their success, because nobody just wants to have a career night every night. It's kind of everyone sharing, and they work really well together. So it's been fun.
And it's putting a spotlight on what are they struggling with now. They really haven't had that second guy come up and score in the last, 6 games or so. This does lead into one of mine, so I'll go ahead and just throw that straight out there. Mason Gillis's, you mentioned it, 9 3-point performance, record for a Boilermaker in Mackey Arena. I remember vividly the Hummel game where he had about 8 in the first half and then didn't get another one. But Mason Gillis is a guy who, as you said, has sacrificed, has bounced back and forth between starting lineup, on the bench. I think it's very clear that in most programs he would play a lot more than he does now, but with him in first there. The fact he was able to put up, I had it pulled up, there we go. The 9 3-pointers, he did it in 25 minutes of action. It's crazy. Just absurd to me. And it happened in such a flurry. It was one of the most impressive shooting performances just off the bench. And I have a feeling if Purdue is going to have success later on in March, I think Mason Gillis is going to be a big reason why, because I think of anyone on this team who has shown consistently that he has an ability to knock down shots, and you just watch him, like the shot looks good. It doesn't look fluky at all. So I definitely think, and it's just a cool story. Setting that record off the bench, like, love that.
It was really cool too, because that game Robbie Hummel was calling it.
Yes.
And he did the post-game interview with him, and it was just so funny, like listening to him, like, all right, he's tied with me, and he was tied with a few other guys at 8. And then when it was 9, everyone was like, Robbie, like, and then he got to do the post-game interview, and I thought that was just like a kind of a cool moment. But yeah, the thing with Gillis, I interviewed him before the season, and I asked one word to describe yourself, and he said tough. And you see it when he's out there. It is so physical, and like he is running towards the basket after every shot goes up. He's boxing out. If you just look at him during a free throw when he's boxing out, like, it is tough down there, and he's right in the middle of it. And I think that, I mean, the toughness, the aggression, like, it shows, and he has really productive minutes when he's in there, even though it might not, sometimes it's not necessarily points, but grabbing rebounds. Like, he's fun to watch, but not necessarily besides that insane performance. He just does a lot of things when he's not necessarily scoring, which I think is very important.
Yeah, sometimes you just have to look at his teammates, who I think there's 3 or 4 of them that have war wounds from practicing with Mason Gillis. David Jenkins' eye was awful to start the season. Yeah, he's so fun. For someone, I love the just like dichotomy of his game, because his jump shot is so pretty, and everything else he does is just like a football player on the basketball court. It's hard to make sense of all the things he does.
No, I definitely agree. This kind of relate. This will be my segue. Mason Gillis is also a great leader. He's always talking, whether on the bench or on the court. And he's a leader for those freshmen, which is kind of my next favorite storyline, the emergence of the freshmen. I remember when I did one-on-ones before the season, I did a season preview with Ethan Morin, Zach Edey, and Mason Gillis. And the theme of it was the underdogs, the rebuilding year. And I asked, you're losing so many guys. And that was the theme of it. And then I quickly regretted that being the theme, because they went to Portland, they beat Gonzaga, they beat Duke. They just had that crazy run up until pretty recently, actually, up until February, I guess. But just the way that these freshmen, as of recently, they've definitely had their moments. I think looked a little bit more like freshmen these last, 4 out of 6 games, losses, when you kind of see the weaknesses a little bit more than a win. But just the way that I remember the Nebraska game, Fletcher Lawyer coming in clutch. I remember just the way Braden Smith drives to the hoops. He's not the biggest guy out there. No. And somehow he finds a lane, he gets up there. Like, it's just crazy watching how confident they are in themselves, in their game, in their teammates, and just how comfortable they are, like even in like interviews and stuff like that. Like, they know who they are, they know who they want to be, they know their goals. And with a lot of freshmen, they're jittery, they're nervous, and we saw that in the exhibition games and stuff like that. But the way that they've come up clutch, the Michigan State game at Michigan State with Fletcher Lawyer, Zach Edey obviously had the game winner, but he's driving to the basket, like when his shot isn't working, he's doing other things to get to the rim. But it's just really, really cool watching them too, and knowing that they'll be back, and for a few years. It makes the future look it's very comforting looking at them and then thinking about the future of Purdue.
Yeah, I think that's it, because it's a storyline that stretches out. I don't know how you can be pessimistic about the Purdue program going forward when you have these 2 cornerstone guards, which is, everyone says the problem with Purdue is they don't have the guard. These freshmen are doing this now. Barring an unlikely 4 to 5 inch growth spurt, or 10 inches on their vertical, they're probably going to be around for 4 years. So like, these guys are here and they're going to grow each season. They've already way exceeded expectations. So the idea of Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer being like the thing Painter can like staple his next few recruiting classes to, I don't know how you can be anything but super optimistic about the future of Purdue. And the present's been pretty damn good. So I definitely think if either of those 2 guards are not what they had been, if they were even close to their expectations, Purdue doesn't win Portland. They're not 13-0. They don't get ranked number 1. They don't have a chance for a 1 seed. They don't have the Big Ten title wrapped up. All of these things are kind of overshadowed by a bad 2-3 weeks now. But like, they did the work early.
That's the thing. It's so funny. Like, obviously, like, it's so hard watching them lose, but I see a lot of people say, like, we have to remember what we've already accomplished. And this definitely isn't the best time to be in a slump, but like heading into March, things like that, you look at teams like Northwestern, Maryland, they're peaking at the right time. But you have to remember just the other wins that this team has gotten and what these freshmen have been able to do. Obviously, a loss was going to come. The Rutgers loss, a loss was going to come eventually and break the perfect season. And so the fact, though, that what they've been able to accomplish, and there's still time to accomplish things. We haven't even hit the Big Ten tournament, the NCAA tournament. And so, you hope that they can kind of figure it out offensively and shooting wise and everything like that. But just the way, like, these freshmen can say that they've done a lot of things in their first year. They won the Thanksgiving tournament that they played in. They were the number 1 seed. They were top 5 seed for a lot of the season. I think basically the entire season. They Big Ten title, regular season champions, at least a share of it for now. But it's just crazy, the resume that these 2 freshmen have already built. It's insane.
Yeah, Fletcher's had a few 20-point games. He's shown, obviously the jump shot's not there, but like, he's not afraid of the moment. Michigan State game, perfect example. Nebraska game, great example. And then Braden Smith is just this quiet 9 to 10 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists. As a true freshman, you're not supposed to be consistent or well-rounded in that way. And both of them have shown a surprising ability to already be there. And for a program that a fan base that is so obsessed with March results, it's amazing how much they can dismiss like March is what matters. So while it's not the greatest timing, Purdue's Elite Eight run, they lost to Minnesota the game before the last game of the season, and then got bounced by Minnesota again in the first round of the Big Ten tournament. Carson Edwards, as mentioned after the game by Payne, was shooting, I think, 28% from three in the entire Big Ten conference. They were winning games, but they didn't look as good as they had looked at certain parts of the season. It all changes in March. All of a sudden, you're getting 4 days to scout Zach Edey. That's a problem. I was talking to Raphael this week. I'm like, how long do you need to like implement, like, if you don't already double in the post, how long do you need to implement that? And he's like, it's impossible. You can't do it for a tournament. 4 days is not enough to learn a new defensive scheme. Big Ten, not surprisingly, knows how to deal with big guys. There's big guys everywhere. So I think the NCAA tournament will kind of be a breath of fresh air for these guys. And so far, the freshmen in new challenges have come up to it. So I guess we'll lead into my second storyline, which is the Portland tournament overall, where I think Brandon Smith and Fletcher Loyer really announced themselves, along with Zach Edey, obviously. To beat Duke and Gonzaga back-to-back games was very satisfying. And to do it in a fashion, the West Virginia game got close in the second half, but Duke and Gonzaga never mounted a serious threat against Purdue for 80 straight minutes. And that was something, it was weird. It was weird to go there without any drama and just see Purdue dominate from start to finish of the tournament.
No, I remember that Gonzaga game. I wasn't there, but I was watching it, and it sounded like a home game, a Gonzaga home game. Like, it seemed like, I know it was a neutral site, but it seemed like kind of their first true road game in a sense, because it was just loud and not a lot of Purdue fans were there, mostly just families and stuff like that. And I was like, this is a tough atmosphere. It's Gonzaga. Like, they're going to be good. Drew Timmy's going to do the, and so it was really, really, it was just so interesting that, everyone underestimated them. And I felt like that was kind of their first statement win. And then to go beat Duke convincingly, it was like, wait a second, like, this team's really good. Like, I think that's when everybody kind of opened up their eyes a little bit, and where it was like, wait a second, I think that Purdue is on to something, because they just picked up 2 really big wins early in the season when a lot of teams don't have it figured out yet. But yeah, that was kind of the start, I think, of, all eyes on Purdue. We're actually, there's a team, something's going on here. And so I definitely agree. That was huge. And that was really exciting too. Like, my first season kind of covering Purdue, and I see them beat Duke, Gonzaga. Like, I've seen them do a lot of things this year, but that was a very crazy start. And that's when I started regretting my one-on-one interviews talking about the underdog.
I mean, it's fair when a team loses a top 5 NBA pick, their leading center for the last 4 years, 4 starters, 3 starters. Like, this wasn't supposed to happen, but to see, I mean, it was a coronation of Zach Edey. Like, by the way, it wasn't just random that for 20 minutes a game, he was the most dominant player, like, efficiency wise. He can do that the whole way. And when you beat Philip Hakowski and Drew Timme in back-to-back games, it's really hard to argue. At some point, you're like, oh, this is real. He's 7'4" and can move weirdly well and has great hands. And you don't need a whole bunch besides that. It's not like Purdue had like a crazy shooting experience then either. It's just like, get to 40% from 3, and I'm pretty sure no one could beat you. That's a low bar.
I think I wasn't going to mention this as my first storyline because it's like stating the obvious, but now that we've talked about it, I feel like my third storyline has to just be Zach Edey as a whole.
Yeah, it's written on mine for sure.
My angle of it to kind of change things up, because we all know what he could do, was kind of just his leadership. His way of being a leader, it's so interesting how quiet he is and how humble he is and how he can stay so composed. And sometimes watching him on the court, it's like he'll like yell after a basket, and I'm like, oh, he's showing emotion,
Emotion.
like, because he's just like, he puts his head down and he works. And
Right.
like it's so hard doing interviews with him at the media availabilities because he speaks so quietly and he's so soft spoken, and I'm like holding up the microphone, like, come on. But no, just what he's been able to do. I remember before the season, obviously he split time with Travion Williams. I watched Purdue the last few years, obviously, and because they've been really good. And, he split time with Travion Williams. He'd go in there, clean some things up, give Travion a break. And he was good, definitely, but still kind of figuring himself out. And everybody wondered this year, like, can a guy of his size play for extended minutes? Like, that is tough.
Right.
And the way that he's been able to, one, play for extended minutes and then be so productive in that time, it's just crazy. Like there's been times when I run highlights after a game and I'm like thinking, all right, like, who else can I talk about? Because I'm just so used to Zach Edey getting 25, getting a double, getting
Casually.
25 points, close to 30. So I'm like, I'm really emphasizing, Fletcher Lawyer's 16 points, but I'm like, everybody's used to like Zach Edey double. Like, that it's just crazy. The numbers he's putting up, the attention that he's gotten has been awesome for him, for Purdue, his mom even.
Yeah.
But I think, aside from all the stats, just the way that he leads this team, I think his personality is kind of rubbed off on everyone else.
Right.
That he's not selfish. He wants to win. He said it multiple times in press conferences. I'm not the only one on this team. I think it's deserve more credit. He said once, I don't care if I score the ball. I just want to win. Like, I think that just says it all. Like, he's humble. He's hardworking, and having a guy like that as your main guy, that rubs off on everybody else. And that helps with team chemistry, that helps with their confidence, that helps with the way they carry themselves. And it is fun, obviously, having the one guy who's holding up the signs and really excited, but there's also something also just comforting about having someone like Zach Edey, who's not so much in your face, but gets the job done. And he's a really just likable player, I think, to watch and to talk to. And I'm for sure for Matt Painter to coach, because he's willing to learn. He goes up to Matt Painter after a timeout and taps him and asks questions. You don't see that much, So yeah,
it could easily turn into just like, these are lip service answers, like just saying the right things, but you can tell it from top to bottom they believe it, and that comes from Edey. It's almost boring covering this team sometimes when you're talking to him, because the answers don't change. It didn't change when they were 13-0. It didn't change when they were 22-1. It hasn't. It's gotten a little shorter the last few games afterwards. There's been some frustration, but like, the answer to the same, even after the IU game. I have full faith in everyone on my team. I believe they're going to make shots. I believe like he's on the team he wants to be. Like, there is a process, and that's what they care about. And talking like Braden and Fletcher, they don't deviate off that script. Edey doesn't deviate off that script. Ethan Morton will talk more, but he doesn't. It's still on the same script. Same thing with Mason Gillis. Like, they're
another
all.
thing with IU is, sorry to interrupt. The IU game was also when Edey grabbed the mic from Braden Smith, which everybody loved that. And that wasn't even like an attention thing. That was just genuinely Edey sticking up for his freshmen. And another thing with having someone like Edey and then having the freshmen, like we talked about earlier, is that their passing is so good, passing it into Edey. Like, that's hard. And I remember the Michigan State game, Fletcher's pass, like, it was just a perfect pass.
Yeah.
And it's tough passing in. Like, I've never done it, but I see how tough it is. If I had a Big Ten defender on me and Edey's being doubled or Edey's trying to post up, that is tough. And so the way that the freshmen are able to pass into him, and then the way Edey can finish, like, it's just like you said, it goes down to everyone. And it's really helped the entire team, just having someone like Edey, but then also players that can play off of him, play around him. He can kick it out to them. And then in the locker room, he's going to support all of them. And I think that's huge.
Yeah, especially because like, these guards are coming in. I talked to Jenkins a lot about this early on, and he's played a lot of basketball. This is year 6. I think he is, I think, 8 years removed from high school. Oh, wow. Still playing college basketball. And
there's a lot of people like that.
And he's like, I've never played basketball like this, because like, you don't throw it inside anymore. That's not how basketball works. So to get buy-in from every guard and to completely change everything, and it's just, if they didn't believe in Edey in the way that people talk about believing, like, if it wasn't real, none of this would have gelled the way it has. So it has been very cool to see all that happen.
Mhm.
And to segue into my third one, that doesn't happen without someone like Painter. And I think for Matt Painter to continue this quickly bounce back, we've seen Painter bring programs back up from the depths a couple times, where when he inherited the Purdue program, obviously kind of devoid of talent, baby boilers really got him back on the map. Then he had, a couple recruiting classes where the only person that stayed for 2 years was Raphael Davis. And then Dakota Mathias, Isaac Haas, PJ Thompson kind of brought him back. And now all you're seeing is he's building. And even when we thought the Purdue program was going to take a big step back, turns out they're going to be ranked number 1 for the second straight time, only the second time ever. And this time they're going to do it for 7 weeks. And they're going to start off 13-0. And they're going to be the last team in Division I with 1 loss. So I think just the overarching story of Painter being comfortable with who he is. I do have an interesting observation that I've seen the last couple weeks. He's mentioned at the Maryland game, he mentioned it at the Pallister, I believe, and he mentioned it at the IU game.
I know exactly what you're going to say.
Yeah, that he's had offers to go elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea, I think what he said after this game was it upsets him to think that he wouldn't be coaching Purdue at Assembly Hall anymore. That bothers him.
Mm-hmm.
What do you make of all of a sudden? To my knowledge, he's never brought this up candidly before. So what do you make of this?
I noticed that he brought it up at the Maryland
Mm-hmm.
game. I wasn't there, but I watched the post-game press conference, and I noticed he brought that up, and I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Like,
Mm-hmm.
like he kind of brought that up. Like, I've gotten other offers, but I think at Maryland he said, but then I wouldn't get to be in these environments and get to coach these nail biters. These, like, the Big Ten is such a good league, and I wouldn't be a part of that, and he would miss it. And I was like, wow, that was kind of interesting you mentioned that. And then at the IU game, I wasn't sitting in the press conference because, of course, the game ended at like 10. I had to be live at 11 and do everything. So I'm like cutting video in the corner.
There wasn't room in there anyway.
Yeah, there wasn't room. I had a front row spot and I gave it up because I was like, I don't have time to ask questions. I got to go live. But I was cutting video in the corner, standing up, and I heard him. I couldn't see him because there were so many people, but I heard him bring up, I've had plenty of offers and chances to go elsewhere. And I was like, wow, that's another time I've heard him say that. That was the second time I personally heard him say that. And I was like, wow. And then he said, but then I wouldn't get to go to Assembly Hall, and I wouldn't get to coach these types of players and these types of teams and go against a team like IU. And I just thought it was so interesting. I was like, I wonder where he's considered. And there's rumors everywhere, and I'm sure we can find, oh, he could have went here. But I mean, Purdue being his alma mater, like, I don't think he could leave Purdue, but the fact that he's mentioned how many opportunities he's had as of late, it's really interesting. I think that every time he's mentioned it, I'm always like, like,
and it's after losses, generally. Because I was talking to Ledman at Hammer and Rails about it a little bit, and like, is it talking to the fans, telling them, hey, by the way, I'm here? I don't think so, because I don't think Painter cares that much about that.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I mean, fans, a lot of people, like any school, any program, you lose, coach fired, this player's awful. Like, it's the natural reaction. It's how you handle a loss.
Right.
And that's why social media is tough sometimes, because it's an instant reaction. And but I think, I mean, he could be saying it like, I could leave. But I feel like I don't think he's petty like that. He's awesome. And even in the short time I've known him, just the way I've been in a lot of press conferences, and sometimes sometimes you always just get the same answer. And sometimes, oh, it's a great opportunity, or, this is going to be a great challenge. We need to work together. It's the candid lines that, everybody says. And with Painter, you ask a question, he looks you in the eye, and it'll be the simplest question. How important is a win tomorrow? And he'll talk to you for 2 minutes about it, and list every player on the other team, what every player is capable of, like, just the like he doesn't have to do that.
No.
And sometimes it's really hard for me, like for TV, we have 20 seconds to listen to him speak. And I'm like, but he says 10
Right.
minutes of great quotes.
We'll
How
just
do I
make a
miss this
show.
20 seconds? But I'm like, that's what Twitter's for. I put the clips I don't use on Twitter.
Fair.
But no, he's the way he carries himself, and
Mhm.
you can tell he has great relationships with his players, but then also is a great leader for them.
Right.
And you know, I've I went to Butler. We had a lot of coaching changes the time I was there before I came in, and when I left. A lot of other programs, you look like Chris Holtman at Ohio State. Everybody is calling for his head, but at Butler, when he coached at Butler, he was really, really good. And so, you know, coaches are naturally going to go through slumps. Painter said that, you know, he's won the Big Ten, I think 1, 2, or 3 times, but he's lost it also 2 times.
Right.
And so I think that, and he looked at me and he goes, "That's not something you put on your Facebook page." I was like, but I think that he said like every coach goes through slumps, and it's just how you bounce back. And I think Painter is able to bounce back. And like, you have to think in their slump, they beat Iowa, they beat Ohio State. Like they haven't lost 5 straight, 6 straight. And so I think it's just these next 2 games. I said the IU game would mean a lot in terms of where they're looking, but I do think at Wisconsin, especially that after that Michigan game and then Illinois, I think that those will be just 2 good indicators in terms
Right.
of confidence for the postseason. And it's going to be all Painter is, can he lead them in the right direction, get them back in the right mental state? So those will be really big.
Yeah, it's always, because I've been lucky enough to, even when I wasn't doing this full time, to be at most NCAA tournaments for Purdue.
Mm-hmm.
So I've seen him after I was on the floor for the Virginia loss. I was there for the Texas Tech loss. It sucks. Obviously, he's not happy about it. But even after those losses, there is a calmness and just like an evenness to Painter, and just the way he's able to quickly process and create a dialogue about even the tough things is really unusual. There's no Izzo spats. There's no, whining afterwards. Like it's to see him get recognition. And sometimes it takes something like this, because success tends to almost diminish how good of a job some schools do, because you're not going to give a coach award to someone who's supposed to be in the top 5. So to see him just be able to turn this team into that is really helped even more for everyone nationally to appreciate what anyone around him has been able to see for the last few years.
It's also funny how he after like the Maryland loss, I think of, in the IU loss, he is just like comfortable. Like he says, he said after the IU game, like he'll laugh and he'll say like, I think after the IU game, someone brought up Jalen Hood-Schifino and he goes, "Yeah, he can make a shot, right?" And then he started laughing, and then he said like, "Yeah, like I'm not gonna cry about it." Like he's just like, he's human. And I think that, when he's after a loss, that he's not, he handles it really well, I think. And and the Maryland game too, like I can't remember exactly what it was, but he was laughing and he made a joke about I can't remember it, but
security.
yes, the security, like
Yeah.
the Maryland's #1 in security for court storms. And the way he can just, I don't know, just the way he carries himself, I think says a lot. And yeah, he's been fun to cover. And I definitely agree that he's a very good coach. Like Purdue has a gem with him. And despite the slump, I think you just have to wait. The season's not over yet. So we'll see.
Small little tidbit on the security. Yes, they did great getting Purdue out of there. For at least the 5 to 10 minutes that we were waiting to get through people to get out, we are watching multiple human beings just hang on the rim. And like one kid was standing on the rim. So good job getting the players out. Maybe protect the hoops more though.
Yeah, I went to a Maryland Butler game when I was in high school, and they are loud and rowdy and into it. And I knew it would be a crazy atmosphere, but when they had the chance to storm the court, I was like, oh, that's going to be mayhem. And if you look at the other court storms, it's a full court, but you could still see the corners. You could still see the floor, the hardwood. Maryland covered, every inch of it was covered. It was like the entire school was out there. It was crazy to watch.
Probably the best environment I've been to besides Mackey.
Really?
I think it's a little better in Assembly. Assembly is so angry, and they're just and they're dumb. like they're dumb fans. They complain about every call is just has to be
Their atmosphere is really cool. Just it's just Indiana basketball. Like when I walked in there, I was like, wow, this is legit. And Michigan State, I loved Michigan State.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
It was loud there. That was kind of my first arena where I was like, whoa.
Big Ten basketball is real. Well, Kelly, thank you for coming on. This has been great. Where can everyone check you out at?
Well, I'm on WLFI, but if you're not in our viewing area, then my Twitter is at Kelly Hals. I tweet a lot. Sometimes I tweet too much, but a lot of Purdue stuff. And you can catch me on there. And I do a lot of little press conference clips and interviews and stuff like that. So
you're rooting for Butler tonight.
I also sometimes tweet about Butler, but not that much. Not as much as Purdue.
Fair enough. You got a Boiler on your team now, so
yeah, exactly. Eric Hunter Jr.
All right, well, thank you, Kelly. I'm Casey Barley, and this has been the Boiler Upload podcast.